Hello. A recipe for observability. My name is Dennis. I am a principal software engineer working for Vorwerk since now around 5 years. And this is?
This is Tim. I'm a site reliability engineer at Vorwerk since 3.5 years now. And because Dennis is longer at Vorwerk than me, he's doing the introduction about what we're actually doing at Vorwerk.
Yeah, but he's lying. He was a contractor before me, so. But anyway, I lost in a way. So Vorwerk, you may have heard of Vorwerk. It's not a player you often heard in IT. You usually know it from somewhere else. Your great-great-grandparents may have bought a carpet from us. Your parents may know Vorwerk for its vacuum cleaners. And you may want to have one of our products in your kitchen, which is the Thermomix. We have these two product lines, basically, which is cleaning and what we call culinary. So this is everything that comes to food in the end. And Tim and we are working for the culinary area. So we are telling you how this is working with the Thermomix. So the Thermomix now exists for a bit more than 50 years. In the very beginning, it was, as we digital guys used to say, it was just hardware you have in your kitchen. But over time, the customer demand arose, and we included more and more digitization options into our product line. First with the TM5, which allows to attach digital cookbooks to it. Later with a Wi-Fi assistant cookie. And later on, the TM6 has everything in it tightly integrated. So what are these products you have there? For those of you who don't know, the Thermomix has now something which is called guided cooking. So these recipes we sold in the very beginning just as books to give people an understanding how to cook a meal with this device are now digital recipes which are basically a program for the device which tells you which steps you need to take, which food you have to put into it. It will weight it for you. It will come up with the correct settings so that in the end, when you're done and ready with your recipe, you see you have a meal as it is intended by a professional chef. And what we have by now is also a website to maintain all these recipes, and this is Cookidoo. So this is basically what Tim and I are working on, this Cookidoo platform. You can imagine the Cookidoo as something like a streaming service or Netflix or Spotify, but for recipes in a way. And this is the service we are building. This is now running worldwide, and we have this from an infrastructure perspective now running in the US, in the European Union, in China. Oh, I'm so lucky I don't have to deal with China. And from a regulation perspective, it's quite difficult. And also in Australia. Back in the days, it was just an SAP Hybris instance which was all doing this, but I'm very happy that this is no longer running the show. What powers all this? So our developers come up with around about 3,000 commits, 1,600 pipelines, and around 60 deployment each day, every working day to get all this running. This means an infrastructure, something like 16 Kubernetes cluster, many data, many lambdas, you get the idea. But for what are we doing this? So we have, to give you an impression of what this means for observability, we have more than 5 million paying subscribers to our platform, which may do 5 million cooking sessions each day. And in general, we have around 10 million connected devices in the end. So this, from an IoT perspective, this is quite a lot. But why did we invest it in Grafana? What is our journey? How did we come to Grafana? It was actually always ever been there. So this is the earliest screenshot somebody found from 2060, but, sorry, went too far. Well, no, it's working. But initially, we started 2015 to just use the open source version of Grafana to monitor AWS Cloud. Later, we moved to Instana for everything, more or less, but there was also the ways to integrate Instana data into Grafana dashboards. 2021, we decided to replace Instana, a transition which started last year. And now we are 1 year into having Grafana running for everything on observability. So why did we ended up initially with Instana? Usually this is something which is tightly moving, so something you may have seen today, but a lot bigger. This is quite nice. This can make a super sales pitch if you have something like this. And our CEO at that time really loved that tool because it looked so complicated and fancy when everything was moving around. But in the end, this maybe not that super helpful. What we also wanted to have something that allows more integration into our toolscape, into our landscape, that you can say alerts are displayed somewhere else, you want tighter integration to Slack, want to get metrics from GitLab, stuff like that. And this is where it gets difficult also with Instana. What you get with the tool in the past was you had fixed dashboards, and some people really loved them because they gave them a real impression of what is going on in terms of observability. But sometimes, if you are really in a crisis situation, it can get difficult, especially if this is everything you basically have. So this is a bit different for Grafana. So now there is a move to also come up with automated dashboards, which is a good thing if you have nothing. But if there's only one way to have this, it maybe can be difficult. So one thing that always annoys me when I think back of this, an error call. What is an error call? An error call is everything that is in HTTP 500 or higher. But sometimes you may think in the semantics of HTTP and think, hey, if there isn't something and I want to make this a valid outcome, then this is part of your business logic that you say HTTP 400, this isn't there. And then you end up with automated alarms saying, hey, there are too many 400s, something is going on, and all your dashboards look, or your automated dashboards look difficult. For me, the tipping point was the 9th of August in 2021. There we had a P1, and this P1 took quite a few hours to get it done. And the initial error message we got was something like, cannot make something with the database. No connections anymore. And this is something Cedric said in the last talk. The data was there. It was visible. What was the actual problem? What it was hidden somewhere below in a perspective of a perspective of a perspective. And it took some time to get there and actually inspect that to see the problem is just something else. This is my highest voted Stack Overflow answer. I'm still proud of this. I'm not doing any much on this side, but still kind of proud. So anyhow, how did we move to Grafana? This is something where I now hand over to Tim.
So yeah, how did we actually migrate more than a dozen of teams, get them up to running in about 6 months, I guess? Should be roughly the timeline. So when we set out as the SRE team in 2022 with the official approval to look for something to replace Instana with, we came around with OpenTelemetry, and that looked promising 2022. I mean, 2 years ago, I think Traces was just GA, but everything else was still alpha, beta, something. But we said, maybe open source is a good way. And I think until to now, that really stands true. On the one side, that helped really for the documentation part, because no vendor can produce that many information for you and for your developers how to solve things than the open source community. Other providers were still pushing their implementation. 2022, more are using OpenTelemetry now, but as we heard before, they're still putting something on top of OpenTelemetry. And Grafana didn't really do that, so that was at least a part of our choice. The next, probably obvious step was to start with our platform teams and get first the Kubernetes integrations, all the default logging you need, get everything up and running, learn how to use it, how do we provision dashboards? Do we still want to do that as code as before, or do we just rely on Grafana Cloud managing this for us? That was also a good point for us to learn how to handle that and give teams already advice. Maybe look here, look there. Could be problems. Maybe if you enable a whole production cluster with one click and now sending double the metrics or double the logs, Grafana Cloud says, yeah, well, maybe turn down, we're rate limiting you for a moment. Then the next part was early adopters, and there was where Dennis was coming in again, because he was an early adopter on Grafana even before we officially used it. And we started with some hands-on workshops and really set together with the team how can we get the best out of their metrics, how to implement, which exporters are there for Java, for Python, whatever. And that also helped then again to create templates for the other teams which were not so eager to migrate. But these teams were eager to migrate because they already knew Grafana. They knew, I know this tool, I know how to write PromQL, give it to me right now, I need it. And that really helped to get them into multipliers in our organization. And then you also have the teams which don't want to go first, and you always have to push them a little bit. So we pushed them and helped them on the implementation side, and they just wanted to finish that. We didn't use Euler, Baylor is the name, right, for that, but we then just took over the implementation effort from the SE perspective. Why did we do Grafana Cloud? Well, we had Loki before, and we already reached a limit where you had to tweak several settings and say, well, we need some longer retention here, some more timeouts there. And we were getting experts in maintaining a Loki stack. But we shouldn't be experts in maintaining a Loki stack, we should be experts in providing recipes to customers. And now our observability team can help developer teams to get most out of Grafana Cloud instead of maintaining the Loki stack. Also less on-call and maybe easier to, because there's always the question, who monitors the monitor? And now that's at least not our problem anymore. Now 1 year in, we have around 350 dashboards, hundreds of alarms, a lot of metrics and data. What are we actually doing there?
Yeah, but let's be honest, not all these 350s are visited daily. Sorry. So let's iterate a bit about what recommendations we give to developers, how they could make the most out of it. We said we came up with default dashboards we gave to developers, which start basically with what you usually have, these red metrics of rates, of errors. There's also distribution more below. What we also did is we form of standardized to have a better understanding from which region in the world this is coming from. But I have to be terribly sorry. At this size, the EU flag and the Australian flag are basically just blue pixels, so we decided that it's now a kangaroo. If the log or the error log line is coming from Australia. We also encourage teams to come up with logging markers to say something like how many logs do you even have there. Also to give an impression of what is the right amount of errors. Let's be fair. Applications everywhere in the world will have some kind of errors you see there. But if you start with these dashboards and with these panels, they have no upper bound, and something which is maybe 3 errors might look like much. So you need to give them a better scaling that you have a better understanding. What also was working quite well is having some clocks within, especially if you're in a distributed scenario where you're worldwide, that you have a better understanding if, okay, this is an incident now, but it's in Australia, 3 o'clock in the night, so don't super stress everything. I said this with error markers. What was also good is a pattern that you say when you're logging errors or warnings, that you give them a distinct number. This is something that is quite common in enterprise products. And what you can do then is you can write a simple Loki rule together with this visualization that gives you an impression. Maybe there are errors, or are there all the same errors? Is there something which is really related to COM 501? Or is this general everything? This gives you a better freedom of mind. If you look at this from a daily perspective, you see in the logs, yeah, there are some errors, but there will always be some kind of errors. But you see, it's just some distributed over time, and there is no clusters building in it. Something else we try to give in, and this is what no automatical, magical automation will give you, is the recommendation to also try to include some kind of business metrics or business data into your metrics. We started to, so where I'm exactly working, I'm working on the component which sells you subscriptions. So my business case is super distinct, so we are making a sale or we are not making a sale. This is something that you can easily count. In this case, you can, when you start to instrument this and you make your dashboards, you start to get a better understanding over time of your domain. How much are we selling? In what countries, something like this. You can further tweak this over and over again, that when business discusses with you what they want, you can tell, yeah, maybe, but this, what you think about is just a minuscule case because this happens super rarely. And also it gives you the freedom when you're in the position that you're making a deployment and every other metric says, yeah, there's still traffic, everything is going great, but suddenly you're not making that much sales anymore, or your usual business case isn't really running anymore. It tells you something is really wrong. Also, and I think you have this everywhere in every company, somewhere you have some managers sitting in some country and it's not working for them. And they make a call to somebody, and they call somebody, and they call somebody, and in the end, you're in an incident call because everything is not working. This is all you get. And then you can go and you refer to your business dashboards and tell, no, I get your point. Maybe there's something for you, and we'll find out, but don't stress out. This is just local for you. One elegant source of having this is maybe you're sending out business events. So in our case, we are sending Kinesis events to some data aggregation system. And these events have names, and here it's super easy to just count the names and how many of these events you're sending out. Or maybe another idea, we're having a voucher reimbursing dialogue. This, we started counting how often was it successful or not successful and made these panels out of this. And with this, you see and can have a better discussion with UX experts and, that something isn't really working that well. In this case, some business dudes had more freedom than they should, and it could the voucher could be lower and uppercase, which was super confusing for customers. Or maybe your domain has what other domains crave. So in my domain, we are also asking customers if they didn't buy a subscription or cancel their subscription, what was the reason for it? And one of the things is I couldn't find my recipes. Finding recipes, this is another domain, this is the search domain, so to say. And we introduced the search team to this metric, and now in their dashboard, they have a panel which just shows, are people quitting because they couldn't find anything, which is a strong indicator for them how good their job is doing, or if the latest deployment brings something up to maybe make people quit because they do not find anything. And then you have these super special cases. You don't see this usually if you're running on a web shop. Imagine the following scenario. One day, a customer calls in, and he appears to be more technical adept than you usually have this. And he says, my Thermomix isn't making an internet connection. It says cannot connect to your platform. But I invested some time, and I see it's not working on my router, but on my mobile phone peering connection. And then you make this face. Because you have to go to that dashboard. What's the idea behind this? The Thermomix uses a custom certificate to secure its communication, and sometimes your ISP decides that custom certificates are unsecure. And you don't have this at super big telecoms, but this is usually something where you have to go to some small Italian ISP and then have a conversation which basically goes like, yeah, we're from Vorwerk, we discovered that you are blocking our traffic. It's likely because you have this ISP enterprise product and you have activated this rule. Can you please forward me to your principal networking engineer? And then it goes like, have you tried turning it off again? And then you have to find your way. If you think this is hard as a customer to get up the line, try it if you have something like this. And what we have, therefore, we have a dashboard which also includes the metrics from which ASN, so autonomous system number, which is basically your ISP, is coming from, that you can differentiate if this is just the customer and he just has a super weird setting on his router, or if there is an entire network segment missing. We're also encouraging teams by now to also include traces. We have seen this also on the ALO demo. We are also including this in the dashboards, that we say maybe just show some traces. We usually have a working mechanism that one developer each week is some kind of sheriff for everything that runs with operations. So whatever comes in issues, are also having a look at the dashboards if everything is working okay-ish. And having these trace ideas invites developers also to look into why is this call slow, and then you identify cases which may be something. I've had this before where we're sending Kinesis events. For some reason, sometimes Kinesis takes 2 seconds to initialize, but this is nothing that a customer needs to be waiting for. This can be an asynchronous task. So we made this an asynchronous task, which was just an idea we came up when we started looking at these traces, why something is slow. Working with traces came really handy over time, and we also learned that in the end, it's just a string and some kind of type you can put in there. And if you have a scenario where you have multiple teams working on this, they can come to the conclusion that they want to add some information to their trace, the same semantic, but maybe find out a different name. Within tracing, there's also the thing, there are different types that are important. True can be a string true, or it can be the type true, or yeah, you get the idea. So we started also making a documentation which can compile itself to a library, which you can then ingest, that you in the end have a Java enum that allows you to come up with standardized names also for tracing, that you can make a TraceQL query and let the autocompletion do its thing, and everybody knows this is the key to search for something super specific. How much time do I have? I give it to you.
So now we have happy developers, and the manager who initially said, yeah, go for it, now he's asking, okay, how much does it cost actually? And you think, okay, we have a lot of data and we pay per metric. Maybe we can reduce that a little bit, because budget is always a difficult thing. So this is a screenshot from our ingest rate or active metric series from last year, or up to this year, I would say. And you see in the beginning we enabled more clusters and more integrations, and we were at around 2.4 million active series. And then quickly after Christmas, I just sat down for maybe an hour or two and just click on adaptive metrics, yeah, enable, 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 and I reduced our metrics without anybody noticing by quite some amount. Because all these standard exporters from frameworks emit really a lot of data. Histograms about how many quantiles? I don't remember. Yeah, and so we don't have to do that with every team and to talk to every team and say, yeah, do we really need that detail level, or is that okay, you don't use it in your dashboard? And now we could just take that off the team's shoulders and do it on a central place. Beginning of this year, there was no adaptive logs, unfortunately, so we had to build something ourselves. So we started with a showback of costs and created just another Grafana dashboard to see which service is sending how much logs. And then you could go to the team and then ask, okay, you have that standard component. You have roughly the same amount of calls than the other ones. Why do you have double the logs? Ah, you haven't turned off debug logging on production. Maybe you should do that. So, and that helped to at least have a 40% reduction of log volume. And I'm just interested to see what we can do with adaptive logs in the future. We haven't tried that yet. And please don't ask what that peak is. That I don't want to talk about that. But what I want to talk about is Christmas. And as that is the right thing to do, usually also bring some wishes, because Christmas is already soon. And our wishes are, at least for my part, is features for multistack. All these fancy new Grafana features and betas where they kindly invite us to are usually bound to a single stack, but we initially decided for a multi-stack setup, and now that's hard to play around with all the new beta features.
Yeah. Building mature enough dashboards also brings in some challenges, so to say. What is the time frame we're looking at? What does this data actually mean? And or what's the? It would be nice to have something to say like everything is running on UTC because we agreed that everything has to be UTC. And it's not something that I manually need to configure in each dashboard manually, so that you're not talking about, yeah, it was at this time, oh no, sorry, it was, in this time it's UTC and then the other one it's CEST. So having something like a linter or more config options, what could be there, or at least give some hints to the ones who are making really the efforts to bring these customized dashboards would be something that would be really helpful also in our case. So, did we miss something?
Yes.
Yes.
We missed AI.
We missed AI. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, AI.
But we asked AI to create a picture for that talk, and no, that's not the new Thermomix. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.